Wyoming Territory, 1873. The wind was cruel that morning, sweeping across the dry plains near Laramie, with the bite of late spring frost still clinging to it. William Tate reined in his horse when he spotted movement by the fence line. Something small, slumped against the base of a scorched cottonwood tree. He tapped his heels gently against his horse's ribs. "Easy, Buck. Let's take a look." The girl looked up as he approached, her eyes wide and too still. She could not have been more than 20, her face pale beneath a layer of road dust. She clutched a baby wrapped tight in a worn quilt, and beside her, half buried in the dry weeds, lay a rag doll with one button eye. William dismounted slowly. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, steady. "Are you hurt?" She flinched but did not speak. The baby stirred weakly, letting out a soft, breathy cry. He knelt in front of her, careful not to scare her more. "Name's William Tate," he said. "I got a cabin a few miles west. Warm bed.
Food.
You and your little one look like you could use both." She blinked, her lips trembling. "Please," she whispered. I do not have anywhere else to go." William nodded once. "You do now." She tried to rise but staggered. William caught her before she fell, one arm around her back, the other steadying the baby between them. "You're safe now, my love," he said without thinking, the words coming out like a breath he had been holding for years. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not pull away. They rode double on his horse, her arms around him, the baby nestled between them both. She was light, too light, and her silence felt like a wound he could not see. At the cabin, he helped her down and opened the door for her. The place was simple: wood stove, cot, table, a few chairs, but clean and warm. He lit the fire, fetched water, made her sit while he warmed up beans and tore off some bread. She ate slowly, holding the baby close with one hand. "What's your name?" William asked gently. She looked up at him, her voice barely above a hush. "Prudence Sawyer." "And the little one?" "Emmett." She looked down at the bundle. "He's just 6 weeks old." William leaned back in the chair. "Where's your husband?" She stiffened.
Gone.
"He left when I started showing. Said he would send money. He never did." William's jaw tensed, but he nodded. "You got family?" "None that would take me in." He watched her for a moment. "Then you stay here. No one's going to hurt you or that boy. I promise." She looked at him for a long moment, something soft and uncertain in her eyes. Then she nodded. That night, she slept in the cot while he took the floor. He woke once to the sound of Emmett fussing and heard her humming low to calm him. It was a soft sound, like hope trying to find space in the dark. Over the next few days, she grew stronger. She helped with meals, swept the cabin, even fixed the latch on the door that had stuck since winter. Emmett began to gain color, his cheeks pinking up, and William found himself smiling more real smiles, not the kind folk give out of habit. He built a crib from leftover pine boards and set it by the fire. When Prudence saw it, she touched the smooth edge with her fingers and whispered, "Thank you." Her voice caught halfway through. William shrugged one shoulder. Figured he needed somewhere better than a pile of quilts. One evening, as the sun dropped low behind the hills, she stood on the porch with Emmett in her arms, watching the sky. "You built all this yourself?" she asked. "Mostly. My pa helped me raise the roof. He passed 2 winters ago." "I am sorry." He nodded. "He was good to me. Taught me how to work hard, treat people right." She looked down at Emmett. "I want to teach him those things too." "You will," William said. "You already are." She glanced over at him, her eyes staying on his a little longer than before. "You are kind, William." He looked away, swallowing. "Just doing what is right." "No," she said softly.
"It is more than that."
She did not say anything else, but when she turned to go back inside, she brushed past him and her hand brushed against his. It was nothing and everything, that touch. The next morning, he found her hanging laundry behind the cabin, her sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. She had not asked to stay. She just stayed. And he had not asked her to go. That night, as the fire crackled low and Emmett slept soundly in his crib, she sat across from William at the table. "I was afraid," she said, voice low. "That first day. I thought you might turn me away. Or worse." He lifted his eyes to hers. "I would never. I know that now." Her voice broke slightly. "But I did not know anyone could be this good." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I am not perfect, Prudence. But I will never leave you or that boy. Not ever." She reached across the table. Her hand closed around his. "I believe you," she said. And for the first time in years, William felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The first real thaw came in late May, when the sagebrush began to green at the edges and the snow line retreated up the mountains. William tacked new boards to the side of the barn while Prudence worked in the garden bed beside the cabin, sleeves pushed to her elbows, a cloth bonnet shading her face. She had borrowed one of his old shirts, the hem tied at her waist, and though it hung loose on her frame, she moved with quiet purpose, hands in the dirt, coaxing stubborn soil to give. Emmett lay nearby in a basket lined with wool, kicking at the air, his fists tight and pink. Every so often, Prudence would look over, and if his feet had twisted the blanket loose, she would tuck it back without missing a beat. William watched from the barn, hammer paused mid-swing. "You always garden this way?" he called. She turned her face toward him, brushing hair from her cheek with the back of her wrist. "It's the only way I know. My mother used to say the ground grows better when it hears your voice." He stepped down from the ladder and crossed to her, wiping his hands on a rag. "What did you plant?" "Turnips. Beans. A few carrots." She leaned back on her heels and looked up at him. "I wasn't sure how much space you'd want me using." He crouched beside her. "Use what you need. If we're growing food, it ought to be enough for all of us." She didn't answer right away. "Then, you keep saying we like I belong here." "You do." She looked at him for a long moment, then turned back to the dirt and pushed another seed into place. That evening, he found her by the creek that ran just beyond the cottonwoods, rinsing out Emmett's blanket. The water moved slow and cold over the rocks, and the sky above it had taken on that coppery burn of dusk. "I didn't expect to feel useful again," she said without turning. "Not after everything." "You are," he said. "More than you know." She wrung the fabric tight, water dripping from her elbows. "I used to be a seamstress in Cheyenne. Before all of it. Before Emmett. I was good at it too. Folks used to say I could stitch a hem straighter than any woman west of the Missouri." "You miss it?" She nodded once. "I miss being seen for something besides the weight I carry." William stepped closer. "I see you, Prudence. Not just what you've lost. What you are." She looked over her shoulder. "And what's that?" He hesitated. "Strong. Honest. Capable." Her mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close enough. "That's not the kind of thing men usually notice." "I'm not most men." "No," she said, voice softer now. "You're not." A bird called from the trees, sharp and clear, and Emmett stirred in the sling on her chest. She shifted him gently, her hands practiced now, sure and calm. They walked back to the cabin together, their steps unhurried. That night, as the wind pressed softly against the windows and the fire burned low, William worked on mending the strap of his saddle while Prudence sat nearby, rocking Emmett with her foot. She had taken to humming again, different this time, something steady and low that filled the room like warmth. "You think you'll go back to it?" he asked without looking up. "Sewing, I mean." "If I had the tools, probably." She glanced toward the shelf where a few spools of thread sat beside a folded length of muslin she'd salvaged from an old feed sack. "I suppose I'd need someone willing to wear what I make." "I would." She tilted her head. You don't strike me as the ruffled shirt sort. I'm not, he said. But I'd wear anything your hands made. Her breath caught, just for a second. You say things like that without flinching. I don't see much point in hiding what's plain. She nodded slowly. Maybe I'll make a shirt then. Something simple. He met her gaze. I'd like that. Emmett yawned against her shoulder, and she rose to carry him to the crib. William watched her walk across the room, her movement steady, and something inside him settled deeper, like a post driven into good earth. She laid the child down and lingered there, smoothing the quilt with one hand. Then she turned and looked at him. I never thought I'd feel safe again, she said. You are, he replied. With me, you always will be. She crossed the room, slower this time. When she reached him, she touched his arm, light as a breath. He didn't move, just waited. I believe you, she said again, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a promise. June brought longer days and the scent of warm pine drifting down from the hills. William traded a side of smoked venison and 2 jars of wild plum preserves to a passing peddler for a hand-crank sewing machine, half-rusted but sound. He spent an evening oiling the gears and tightening the belt while Prudence watched from the doorway, her fingers curled around a mug of chicory. You did that fast, she said. Figured you'd want it working before your hands forgot the feel. They won't forget. He nodded once and stepped back from the table. Try it. She sat, ran her hand down the smooth wood, and set the needle. The first line of stitches came through clean. She didn't smile, but her shoulders settled in a way they hadn't before. By the week's end, she had turned a flour sack into a bonnet, trimmed with faded blue cloth she'd pieced from an old shirt of his. When she tied it on and turned to him, her eyes held something steadier than thanks. It's good to make something that'll last, she said. He touched the brim. Like you said, your hands remember. The cabin took on a new rhythm. William rose early to check the traps and ride the fence line, sometimes returning with a brace of rabbits or a string of trout. Prudence kept Emmett close in a sling she'd sewn herself, patched with fabric scraps and stitched with quiet care. She sang to him while she worked, not lullabies, but soft tunes with no words, melodies wrapped in breath and memory. One morning, William returned from the ridge with a rolled hide strapped behind his saddle. He laid it across the porch rail and unwrapped it to reveal a set of leather working tools. I came across them at Widow Langley's place, he said. Her late brother did saddles. She said they've been collecting dust since he passed. Prudence ran her fingers over the awls and punches. You planning to start making boots? No, he said. But I thought maybe you could use them. For the straps on that satchel you mentioned needing. Or something for Emmett when he's older. She looked up from the tools to his face. You don't bring things without thinking on them first. I thought on this. That evening, after Emmett was asleep and the dishes scrubbed clean, she brought out a folded piece of hide and began cutting it to shape. William watched her from the hearth, his hands idle for once. You always see what's needed, she said without looking up. Not just what's in front of you. I try. She paused. Back in Cheyenne, folks didn't always look at me that way. You're not in Cheyenne anymore. She nodded. No. I'm not. A week later, a letter arrived by stage, addressed in a tight, unfamiliar hand. William opened it on the porch while Prudence rocked Emmett in his arms inside. The letter was from his cousin in Fort Laramie, asking after a team of horses William had helped break the previous autumn. It ended with a line that caught his breath. You always said you'd build something worth keeping. I hope you have. He folded the letter slowly, pressed it into his coat pocket, and stepped inside. Everything all right? She asked, eyes lifting from the child. Just news from kin, he said. Then, quieter. Made me think. About what? He looked at her barefoot in the middle of the room, hair braided back, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Emmett shifted against her shoulder, sighing in his sleep. About how I don't want any of this to be temporary. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she laid Emmett in his crib and turned to face him, hands loose at her sides.
I don't either, she said.
He crossed the floor, slow, careful, until he stood before her. I want to build a life with you, Prudence. Not out of pity, not because of what you lost, but because of what we are now. Together. Her breath shook once before she found it. You mean it?
Ido.
She reached up, touched his jaw with the back of her hand. Then let's make it ours. All of it. He drew her in, arms around her waist, and for the first time, she leaned in fully, no hesitation. The kiss was quiet and real, like everything they'd built together earned, steady, stitched from trust. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves of the cottonwood tree where he'd first found her. Inside, the fire burned low, casting warm light across the room where a woman, a man, and a child had come to belong. The first Sunday of July crept in under a sky the color of fresh linen, clean and high, with no sign of rain. William hitched the wagon early, tucking a folded wool blanket beneath the seat and checking the axles twice. Prudence packed a basket with leftover cornbread, a jar of pickled beans, and a wedge of hard cheese wrapped in muslin. Emmett slept through most of it, full from his morning feeding, his tiny chest rising steady in the crook of her arm. They weren't going far, just the meadow past the low ridge, where wild flax grew in blue clusters and the creek widened into a slow bend. William had cleared the path weeks ago, trimmed back the sage, and laid flat the stones. He said it was a good place to rest a while, and she had believed him. As they rode, the wagon bumped softly over dry earth and wheel ruts. Prudence sat close enough that their shoulders brushed when they leaned with the turns. She didn't speak until the ridge fell away and the land opened wide before them. I never had a proper Sunday growing up, she said. My mother worked the hotel kitchen through every one, and my father was always gone by morning. William glanced over. We went to town sometimes. My ma liked the hymns, even when the preacher couldn't carry a tune. Did you? I liked the quiet after. When we'd drive home, and all you could hear was leather creaking and birds in the grass. She smiled faintly. That sounds like enough. They reached the meadow just before midday. William helped her down, then lifted Emmett gently from the basket and tucked him against his chest while she spread the blanket. The grass was high but soft, bent with the breeze and full of bees. They ate in silence, save for the rustle of wind and the occasional warble of a lark. Afterward, he lay back with Emmett nestled beside him, and Prudence sat cross-legged, pulling a few loose threads from the hem of her skirt. I used to dream about a place like this, she said, eyes scanning the far line of cottonwoods. Not this exact patch of land, but the feeling. Being still. No one looking for something I didn't have. William propped himself up on one elbow. You still dream? I think I stopped when I started counting meals. He watched her carefully. Maybe it's time to start again. She met his eyes, then looked down at Emmett, whose fingers twitched in sleep. Do you ever think about adding on to the cabin? A room for him when he's older. Maybe a root cellar? I've been thinking on it. He sat up fully. Could dig the cellar before first frost. Raise a frame come spring. I could help. I know. She leaned forward, her hand brushing his. I want to build this with you, not just live in it. I wouldn't have it any other way. They sat like that for a long while, hands resting together, the baby between them. When the sun dipped low, they packed up and rode back slow, letting the horses pick their pace. That evening, as they washed up by the pump, Prudence paused with a towel in her hand. I used to be afraid of stillness, she said. Thought if I stopped moving, everything would fall apart. He stood beside her, drying his arms. And now? She looked toward the cabin, where the last light glowed warm through the window. Now I think maybe stillness is where things finally come together. William reached for her hand, not out of habit, but because it felt natural, like closing a door against the wind or drawing a blanket over a sleeping child. "We'll keep building," he said. "Whatever comes next, we do it side by side." She nodded once, and in that quiet moment, with the scent of pine rising from the trees and the hum of insects soft in the dark, something settled between them, firm as timber set deep in earth. July settled into its full weight, the days long and honey-colored, the nights warm enough for sleeping with the windows open. The garden had taken to the earth better than either of them expected. Beans reached for the sky in tidy rows, and the first green tops of carrots pushed from the soil. Prudence moved with easy rhythm through her days, her hands always busy patching sleeves, steeping herbs, checking the jars cooling on the shelf after water bathing them over the stove. One afternoon, while William split cedar for a new gatepost, she stood on the porch, watching him work. Emmett stirred on her hip, drowsy from the midday heat. "I've been thinking," she said. He turned, wiping his brow with the back of his arm. "That's so." She stepped onto the packed dirt, her boots raising little puffs of dust. "I want to have our union blessed proper. Not for the law. For us." William leaned the axe against the stump. "You reckon we need a preacher?" She shook her head.
"No."
"I reckon we need each other, and maybe a witness to say we said the words out loud." He came toward her then, his gait slow but sure, and stopped just short of touching. "You want it soon? I want it before the first frost, while the meadow's still gold." He nodded. "I'll ride to town tomorrow. See if the circuit rider's still in the valley." They married beneath the cottonwoods near the bend of the creek, where the air smelled of wet grass and sun-warmed stone. The preacher, an old man with a bent spine and a voice like gravel, said the words short and plain. William's voice was steady when he answered, and Prudence's eyes didn't leave his once. Emmett, in a clean white shirt she stitched from an old petticoat, gurgled softly in the arms of Mrs. Langley, who'd come with a basket of sweetbread and a quiet smile. Afterward, they shared what food they had with the few neighbors who came, and when the sun dipped low, William took her hand and led her back to the cabin. Inside, the fire was already lit. They'd left the crib by the hearth, and Emmett slept soundly, his hands curled beside his face. William turned to her as the door clicked shut behind them. "You sure?" She stepped into him, her hands sliding around his waist. "I've never been more sure of anything." They lay down together in the quiet, wrapped in the scent of cedar and wool and the soft rasp of breath between them. It was not rushed, nor uncertain. It was the kind of closeness born from trust built slowly, from days tending to the same patch of earth and nights spent listening to the same wind. In the weeks that followed, the rhythm of their life deepened. William built the root cellar with help from a neighbor and reinforced the roof after a windstorm split 2 shingles. Prudence traded a set of baby moccasins she'd sewn for a bolt of calico, and from it made curtains for the windows and a dress the color of creek stone. One evening, she stood at the edge of the porch, watching the clouds gather low and slow in the west. William joined her, a tin cup in his hand. "You ever plan to go back east?" he asked. "No." She rested her hand on the rail. "There's nothing there for me. My place is here." He nodded. "I was thinking of putting a few chickens near the back fence. Maybe a milk cow come spring." She smiled. "That sounds like a good kind of trouble." He grinned just a little. "We'll make it work. One step at a time." That night, a storm moved through, rattling the shutters and leaving the world washed clean. In the morning, the ground was soft beneath their boots, and the sky stretched wide and clear. They planted more before the season turned, tucked in squash and late beans, and once, by the creek, William carved their initials into the bark of a slim cottonwood, high enough that it might still be there 100 years from now. When autumn arrived, it brought a sharpness to the air, but the cabin stayed warm. William added a lean-to off the back, just wide enough for a cot. "For when Emmett's old enough to want his own room," he said. Prudence stood beside him, her palm resting on her belly, the curve of it just beginning to show. "You think he'll want a brother?" she asked. William turned to her, eyes steady. "I think he'll be proud to have one." They did not speak of the past anymore, not because it was forgotten, but because it had been laid to rest. The hurt had not vanished, but it had softened, like wood smoothed by years of handling. By winter's first snow, the house was full of stored harvest, stacked wood, and the sound of a child's laughter. Emmett had begun to walk, unsteady but determined, and Prudence's sewing machine now sat by the back window, where light could reach her hands even on the grayest days. One evening, as the snow fell thick outside and the fire burned low, William lifted Emmett onto his lap and looked across the room to where Prudence sat threading a needle. "I ever tell you I love you?" he asked. She raised her eyes. "You show me every day." He reached for her hand, drawing her close until they sat together, Emmett curled between them, warm and safe. And that's how they stayed, two souls who had known loss, but chose to build something lasting. Not loud, not grand, but honest. True. Forged in quiet mornings, long afternoons, and a promise kept through every season. They never left that land. They never needed to. Their life was not perfect, but it was theirs. And it was good.